we want to talk about on today's program is water quality. And when I think about this, I'm not just thinking about the river or the stream. I'm thinking about the quality of the water that you're putting into your spray tank. We have so many different things that we're trying to deliver into our field, and water is often the carrier. Let's focus on that today.
All right, here are some of the things we want you to think about. First of all, it's how are any of the things in the water interacting with whatever you're putting in. So for example, biological products, herbicides, fungicides. Well, the things that you can test your water for include these: chlorine, calcium, magnesium, copper, iron. So think overall about just chlorine is one thing. Then think about water hardness. And in addition to that, take a look at your water pH.
I first became aware of the pH issue with water back in the 1990s when we looked at some of the sulfonylurea herbicides and the ALS herbicides that were coming out. They were very particular about what pH the water should be in your spray tank. Now, some of them said, well, we've got to have a neutral to slightly higher water pH, or we're going to have issues with performance in the field. Others said, well, we're fine, we need a lower water pH, or we're going to have some herbicide breakdown in the tank. Now, what I mean is herbicide degradation, where you could mix up that spray tank at home, drive out to a field, get the boom folded out, and all of a sudden, you're 15 minutes later, maybe half an hour later from when you put the product in the tank, and now 10% of the product isn't working, or 20% or 30%, and you're not getting the weed control that you were desiring. So that was a big concern for agronomists at that point. Now, when Roundup became the dominant product, well, that wasn't as much of an issue. Roundup liked a little bit lower pH, but for the most part, we were putting in ammonium sulfate and lowering most water pHs down a little bit, and Roundup worked fine. So really, for about 20 years, the whole industry quit talking about water pH, and now we're hearing it again.
I think the reason why we're hearing it now is because of the interaction with some of the biologicals that are out there, both pH and some of those other nutrients that are in the water. Let me just give you an example off our own farm. About 3 years ago, we decided, or mainly I decided, that we were going to move our water tanks off our main farm over to where our field day site is. But what I wasn't even thinking about is, on the main farm, we have well water. On the field day site, we have rural water. Well, what do they do with rural water in our area? They treat it with chlorine. What that means is, yes, we're going to have lower levels of calcium and magnesium. That's nice. But the problem is the pH spikes way up to almost 9 in our case. Plus, we've got that chlorine in there. And why is chlorine in the water? Well, it's in there to kill biologicals, to kill microbes. So if we're throwing beneficial biologicals, some of these products we call naturals, we're throwing them in the water, well, before you even get to the field, they're dead because of the chlorine. So this is one of the things you absolutely have to know. And I don't care if we're talking in a big spray tank, or let's even say it's right at planting time and you're just mixing up a gallon per acre for your biologicals. Well, if you've got chlorine in there, those things are dead. We also have found out high levels of copper are going to kill the biologicals, and in some well waters there are high levels of copper. So we'd really encourage you, just test your water. I don't care what you're spraying, have your water tested. It's super cheap. You only have to do it once every few years, and then you can find out, okay, what do I actually have in my water and what do I need to neutralize?
Well, it's the same thing, Brand. The water hardness that's in there, the chlorine, the pH, all those things need to get adjusted potentially on your farm. Maybe your water's perfect. But I do know this, you mentioned the biological type products, those natural products, fungi, bacteria. Many of the labels will say, mix us with distilled water. I don't know anybody that's using distilled water for their spray tank. So yes, if you're doing it in a seed treater, maybe people are using distilled water. Even there, I kind of doubt it. I think a lot of tap water gets used. So we do want to test the water, and then you're talking about adjusting things in the water or treating things. I get nervous, how much is that treatment going to cost? But fortunately, it's not expensive at all.
No, so there are a couple of products we'll use. One is called BioPrep that neutralizes the chlorine. What it does is turns the chlorine into chloride. Chloride is a nutrient that your crop needs, so there's no problem with that, and now it doesn't hurt a lot of the other things in that spray solution. There's also a product called Water Right that we're using, and again, there are many other products out there, so just find something that works for you. But the Water Right we like because that neutralizes calcium, magnesium, iron, and even copper. Those are basically considered some of the hard water ions, so take a look at all those. And again, we want that pH right. So if you get the pH right, you get the water hardness right, you get the chlorine out of there, all of a sudden you might end up finding, you know what, I thought I had weed resistance with my Roundup or some other herbicide you're using, and you go, oh, wait a second, I think this works a lot better now. We've really seen that across the country because some people say, I have no resistance, their neighbor right next to them has a major problem. Well, a lot of times it just comes down to the water treatments that they're using.
Brian mentioned a couple products that we use to treat water on our farm, and he didn't mention the cost. It's really only pennies per acre. It's not that expensive at all. We're really happy to find that out because we're often out in the field spraying for things like our weed of the week. And we'll show you how to stop this weed coming up later in the show.